Hi, I'm Ariel. You're watching She Wants the Diction, and today I'm going to be doing my favorite books of 2021. I have narrowed this down to a top 10, and I do realize this is kind of late to be posting this video. It's almost the end of January, but to be honest with you, I did not start this year off very well. Like 2022, I'm not feeling it so far. I just kind of feel like one bad thing keeps happening after another. Like, you know, my dad passed away, and I'm finding out a friend is probably going to be passing away soon. And then almost at the same time I found that out, I contracted COVID. So I was sick for probably a solid week. I'm fine now, like I'm better and everything, and my taste is mostly back. It's still a little weird, but yeah, I went back to work 5 days, the fever broke, and I was like immediately back at work, even though I didn't have the energy to be working, and just kind of dragged. So that really sucked. And then literally immediately the day after the fever broke, like my period hit, and I was just like, you know what, bitch, you're just going through it. It's just not your time. It's just not your month. It's just not your life. So, you know, I mean, it's all good now, but it's just like, really is all this happening? So anyways, that's why I'm super late to getting around to posting this video, and probably no one cares at this point, but you know what, we're still gonna do it. I feel like many of these I've talked about multiple times throughout the year, so if you're hearing this more than once, I apologize for the repetition, but I am gonna try to run through these speedily. Number one on this list is gonna be literally Show Me a Healthy Person by Darcie Wilder. This is just like very short format thoughts, but there's kind of no divisions in this book, so it's just like basically like reading someone's unfiltered thoughts. And I really think if, you know, you're a sad bitch, you're gonna like this. You know, it's just very honest. It gives me like internet vibes in the way that it's just like, it's just honest and it's relentless and it's so many things. And I've talked about multiple times how this book basically just like changed my life last year, and that's why it's number one, because it just made me realize like, oh, she has trauma, I have trauma, we're all traumatized, you know what I mean? But it just basically started me down this rabbit hole of like reading so much about like trauma and therapies and mental health issues and all of these things, and it's all because of this book. This book, weirdly enough, gave me distance from my own life in order to be able to see things I wasn't able to see before, if that makes sense. So yes, I did end up buying a copy. I love this book. I do think this book can get a little exhausting just because the relentlessness of it and being like trapped in her mind kind of and in her thoughts, but I love it because I feel like that is the reality of like being in your own brain, is like you can't really get out of it. Like you can try, but it doesn't really work. So it's like being trapped in her world, like that's what it feels like to be alive. So I don't know, I just really like this one, and I really hope that someone actually reads it and I'm not wasting my breath here. Okay, the next one on our list is another sad book. It is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. And I read this at the time when me and Adam were moving down here, which is a really weird time to be reading this honker of a book. But I really, really liked it. I mean, this book is a commitment, obviously, like it's huge. And it's emotionally draining, and it's all of the things. And it's very divisive because there are people that love it and there are people that hate it. I'm definitely one of those people that loves it. This book was more of an experience than a book to me. And, you know, my headcanon is really that Jude probably has borderline personality disorder, which I didn't know a whole lot about, but now reading about it, I'm like, oh my God, he fits like everything. Like I was thinking, oh, he has PTSD, but it's never like named what he has, but just like a lot of his problems, I feel like align with BPD. And it's just interesting because this is a very gay book, but the author herself hasn't really stated whether or not she's gay. And I've already talked so much about this book. Like I have an entire ramble where I just basically talked about like how much it meant to me. And there are so many things that you can talk about with this book. Like I feel like it's a great like discussion book. And honestly, like I don't really understand the people that hate on it. Like especially the people that say this isn't realistic, because I'm like, you must live in our land of sunshine, roses, and rainbows, and you literally don't know anyone that's suffered. And just like the fact that people are like, this amount of human suffering is impossible, I'm just like, no, it's not. Like, it's relatable. And yeah, Jude's life is very much an extreme, but I don't know. I just really admire this book. I love this book. And I did pick up her new one. This is the first book that I've ever bought on release day. And I'll be honest, I've only read the first chapter, so I don't know where this is going. I don't know anything about this, honestly, and I'm feeling like it's probably not the right time to read it yet. But when I get to it, I know that like I'm probably gonna love it just based off of the fact that I loved her last two novels. I just really feel like as an author, it would be impossible for her to just like completely let me down. Like I definitely have seen some negative reviews of this out already, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna let that ruin it for me yet. Okay, the next book on the list is Sisters of the Yam, Black Women in Self-Recovery, and this is by Bell Hooks. I read this at a time when I spent basically all of 2020 reading lots of books by Black authors and lots of books about racism. And I also read almost all of the popular anti-racist books. And I reached a point where I was just like so oversaturated with that and so tired of reading works that are written to white people explaining racism. Like I was just so done. Like at first it was like a curiosity thing. Like I was like, let me see what these authors are saying. Let me see what people who haven't really engaged in race discussions for their entire life, what are they being told and what is being said to them and what are the most popular sentiments that are being shared right now. And so it started out being a curiosity thing, and I was going to do a video sort of comparing and contrasting and talking about these different anti-racist books, but it didn't end up happening because I got very burnt out just with all of the killings and everything that was going on. And so I didn't end up doing that, and I was just like looking for a book that was like talking to me. I was no longer interested in explaining racism to white people, essentially. And so I found this, Bell Hooks. And I really just love the way that her books really speaks to, like, it's blackness and then it's also, like, trauma. And she speaks very openly about the way that she grew up and how, like, it wasn't the best. And I just feel like there is a particular flavor to, like, Black trauma that is experienced in Black families specifically. Like, there are overlapping oppressions. And a lot of us have to deal with like generational trauma, things that have been handed down, you know, all the way back from like the slave days. And these are legacies that have been in our families for a really long time. And a lot of times they have very just traumatic origins. And so then you wonder why it gets all the way down to you and, you know, you have this legacy of there being mental health problems and this and that. Like a lot of us just have a lot of shit to deal with, not even just in our personal lives, but like things from the past that have been inadvertently passed on or what have you. And I just really like the way that her work always speaks to that, and her audience, you know, is Black people. It's not white people. It's not trying to explain racism to them, which can get just very tiring, very exhausting. So this just came to me, you know, right at the right time. And I don't think it's perfect. In fact, I do think her work is kind of a little bit fat phobic, if I remember correctly from reading this. And there are some like little tweaks, but overall it was just what I needed, like right at the perfect time. Okay, the next book I chose was Ordering the Storm, How to Put Together a Book of Poems. This is edited by Susan Grimm. And this was definitely a chance find that I just happened upon at the library. And it's also oddly specific. Like I recognize not everyone is going to be putting together a like book of poetry, which is what I was doing at the time that I was reading this. So unless you're doing that, you probably won't care about this and won't see anything that remarkable about this. But I just feel like this helped my poetry collection evolve like so much. Like I'm trying to like submit it to contests and see if I can get something published. And I just feel like where I started with my chapbook and where I ended were vastly different, and that's because I read this book. And it's basically just essays by different poets explaining how they put together their book, different ideas for doing so. It really just helped me pick out the common themes in my poetry and think about how one poem leads into the next and the flow of it. Just looking at the poems as a cohesive body of work rather than, like when you write a poem, it's an individual poem. And a lot of time passes between these different poems, or they're written at different times. And it was sort of not ordering it like chronologically or by topic, but looking for sort of a flow within these poems. And it just really helped me, I guess, like broaden my vision. I feel like my chapbook is probably better for it. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily going to get published because of that, but yeah, this was just really, really super helpful to me. A very oddly specific book, I know, but yeah, if you're interested in the craft of writing poetry, I would recommend this book. Next is The Art of Mindfulness, How to Bring Love, Compassion, and Inner Peace into Your Daily Life by Thich Naht Hanh. And I talked quite a bit about how I went through this phase last year of being obsessed with Thich Naht Hanh, reading and listening to like as many of his books as I could possibly get my hands on. And this book was recommended to me by Adam, surprisingly. He doesn't really recommend books, but I guess he had like stumbled across this audio, and then he ended up like telling me about it. And I was very skeptical at first, just because I tend to be very skeptical of like spiritual stuff, but I listened to it and I ended up loving it. Like, I love him. I love his voice. He's just so like gentle and funny, and he just explains things like in a way that's easily understood. And I didn't know this at the time, but like how Adam had stumbled upon this book was just like really touching to me, because I didn't know this at the time I listened to it, but basically like after his dad passed away, he was like going through his stuff, and his dad went through like a lot of different phases where like he changed like religious beliefs a lot, like spiritual beliefs a lot. So he was constantly like seeking some sort of like religious connection, I guess. And one of the things that he found in his dad's stuff was like this audio book, I guess. And he had listened to it, and it had really helped him at the time, which is why he recommended it to me, because I was going through such a hard time. And it basically just introduced the concepts of mindfulness, which to somebody like me always kind of had a liking and a leaning for like Buddhism and sort of those adjacent things like that. It always really attracted me. But this was the first time I was being introduced to mindfulness. And for somebody like me whose mind is like always racing, the concept of just like sitting with yourself and being with your emotions was just like revolutionary to me. And I can't always say that it's something that like I want to do or I enjoy doing, because I'm very much an escapist. I'm very much a please distract me. I cannot stand this one more second. Like, especially at my job, just because it's so boring, repetitive, and just like doesn't use your brain at all. So I'm like constantly distracting myself with like music and stuff. But it was like this idea to just like sit with it, just be with it. Like, I have such a problem just sitting there and sitting still and like being with whatever emotion is going on and stuff like that. So yeah, I just found it like really personally helpful for me. And then later I was reading a lot of stuff that was talking about how for trauma survivors, mindfulness, DBT, whatever you want to call it, is actually really helpful. So it's no wonder that actually ended up helping me quite a bit. The next one I have down is Somebody's Daughter, a Memoir. This is by Ashley C. Ford. I picked this up because I listened to a podcast episode, I believe it was Code Switch, where they interviewed her about it, and it was talking about how her dad was in prison for most of her like growing up years. And so that got me really, really intrigued to listen to it. And then when I did listen to it, I was like, this is literally one of the best memoirs that I've ever read. I just connected to it on every level. Her writing was superb. Her reading of it was superb. And it was just like, it's literally one of the best memoirs I've ever read. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And I don't know if it was just because like I connected personally to so much of it. Like, again, that intersection of like Blackness and trauma, and just this really like interesting dynamic where like she was raped and she never knew the crime that her dad went to prison for, but it was rape. And so the dynamics at play there, the dynamics at play within her family, like specifically her mom being abusive, and the way that she never knew if she was going to get like the good mom or the bad mom, like just some of the passages where she explains the things that she went through. She may not be explaining it in like psychological terminology, but she's explaining it so well. Like, she's putting words to things that is just like, how do you even begin to explain it? And I think this is a problem like in a lot of like abusive situations, is like the experience is so confusing and it's so much that it's like, how do you bring words to it? But she does, and she does it so well, and she does it so powerfully. And yeah, it was just a beautiful story, a beautiful memoir. Then I have When They Call You a Terrorist, a Black Lives Matter memoir. This is by Patrisse Khan-Cullors and Asha Bandele. And I read this as a result of a goal that I had for myself, which was to read all of the books put out by the founders of Black Lives Matter. And this one just blew me away. I really think, you know, forget Ibram X. Kendi, forget How to Be an Anti-Racist, forget all those anti-racist books. You need to read this, because this is someone's life experience. And I really think that, I don't think racism is going to be beaten by people learning like these technical terms or learning the history. I mean, maybe it will be, but I really think what people relate to is like personal experience, and they really need to know like how bad it is and how much it sucks. And maybe I'm naive for believing that empathy is the only thing that will make people change their ways. But this book, forget explaining it in a detached third-person manner. Like, this book, she just shows so effectively how racism impacted every aspect of her life and the way that she grew up. And personally, I think a lot of people will find that a lot more meaningful than they will to have racism explained to them, if that makes sense. It's much less academic, I think. And I do hate the idea that like people need to see someone's pain in order to like empathize or like feel for them or like feel for a minority. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like we have to drag our trauma out for people to like try to be less shitty about race. And it's like, I do hate that idea, but unfortunately, I think a lot of times that is the reality. Like no one's going to take action until they see video of someone being murdered in the street. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the sad reality. All right, My Time Among the Whites, Notes from an Unfinished Education by Jennine, Capó, Crucet. And the reason this one's on the list is because I think I was asking around for, like, recommendations about maybe being the only, like, person of color in a white space. And I think my friend Lydia had recommended this to me, and it was a short listen, so I listened to it, and I really, really liked it. It talked a lot about being a first-generation college student, which at the time that I was in college, I was, and it's a very unique experience to kind of be doing something that your parents have like no experience with, like you're the first one. And it can also honestly feel kind of alienating because a lot of times you're surrounded by all of these middle-class white people, or at least I was. And so it was strange to be like a poor mixed girl, like mixed in among that, you know what I mean? And then she also talks about basically being a college professor. And I'm one of those people that's never been able to decide, like, if I go back to school, like, what am I going to study? What am I going to do? I don't know. And when she basically talked about her job, which is, like, she teaches, but then her job with, like, researching and stuff is to create new knowledge. Like, that's how she explained what she does. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh my God. Like, that's literally it. Like, that's literally what I want to do. It's literally what I try to do with everything, is to create new knowledge. Like, I want to say stuff that's never been said before, find stuff that's never been found before, have ideas that haven't been had before. And I also really like, I don't know if you call it teaching, but like talking to people. And obviously like my YouTube channel is an attempt at me doing that. And it also like, I don't know that I always enjoy training, but I feel like I'm a really good trainer, which is teaching in a way. And so I'm like, you know, I definitely have the genes, I feel like, of like my dad's side of the family. A lot of them are like preachers and singers and performers and speakers. And so I just feel like I have a lot of those genes, and it's like, I honestly thought after listening to this, like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be a college professor, because I've often thought, like, you know, I'm good at teaching, I'm good at explaining, I'm good at talking, I guess. I mean, only on the internet, not in real life. I don't know, I just feel like I kind of had a revelation where I'm like, that could be a job that I could do. You know what I mean? That's why everything else I feel like feels so wrong, because it's so unfulfilling. Like, I often feel like I'm not making a difference every single day. Like, yeah, now this person has like a clean hotel room to like go to sleep in, but it's almost like, I don't want to say anyone could do that or that it's meaningless, but it's like, I don't feel like I'm making a difference like with people, you know what I mean? Like, I want a job where like the shit that I do matters, and it matters more than just, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, it's more meaningful. So I just feel like this book gave me a glimpse into that. And she talked about how, you know, she goes around like giving presentations and talking to people, and people are always like shocked, not like shocked that she's a professor, but she just sets an example for all these kids of color who've never really seen a teacher of color. And that holds true for me. I had maybe one professor that wasn't a white person or like one teacher that wasn't a white person in my entire schooling. So you don't really see that. So you don't really realize that's something that you can like reach for, and that's something that's feasible. It's something you can do. And she just kind of talks about the perils of being sort of the first one of her family to like break into academia. So for me, it was just very illuminating. Like, it felt like lightning struck. I was like, that's definitely one of the things that if I did go back to school on the list that I feel like I could maybe do. All right, the last one is Greedy, Notes from a Bisexual Who Wants Too Much by Jen Winston. And this is going to seem kind of unrelated, but I've been binging the podcast Food for Thought, which has like a lot of sexcapades. It's very funny. It's all these super intelligent gay and queer men of different races. They get together, they talk about like pop culture, they talk about just all kinds of stuff. It's been getting me through basically having to work while still recovering from COVID. I really feel like the tone of Greedy is very, very similar to this podcast. And so on the off chance you like that podcast, you'll probably also like this book. I already kind of talked about how I just feel like there's not a lot of works by bisexual people. It's like, where are they? Where is it? I don't know. I don't see it. And this book definitely like filled that void for me. I was like, I want this book. That's a great start. I want so many other books that talk about bisexuality and growing up bisexual and figuring that out and the complexities of that. And she just does it in a way that it's like, it's entertaining, but you also get some woke shit in there, and she just cites all of her sources where she's learning these things from, because Lord knows the labor of people of color is where a lot of white people get their education. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was just really like cathartic for me to finally have a memoir by someone who identifies as bi. So yeah, those were my top 10 books of 2021. So let me know what your favorite book was that you read last year. Down in the comments if you wish. I'd be curious to know. And yeah, I kind of been off of my booktube game. But hopefully I'll get back on it. Like, I literally could not concentrate enough to read while I was sick with COVID. Like, literally all I did was sleep, drink water, and I pretty much didn't move from like this one spot on the couch. I just literally binged Hannibal. Like, that's all I did. That was all I had the brain power or energy to do. And then just like I would fall asleep while I was watching it, and then like get back up and rewind to where I fell asleep and like watch more, which is a really good show. But I just want to say that season 3 is extremely strange, and yeah, like I was really hooked into it. Season 1, season 2 I also thought was pretty good, and then season 3 and I was just like, literally, what is happening? I just feel like it was so strange. Like, anyone else feel this? And also, I'm like so behind. Like, this is such an old pop culture thing that's like, I am like in the dust. Like, I'm like an old person with how long that it takes me to like get to things. I fully understand this. And it's funny because while I was watching, I was like, my boyfriend would hate that this show ships Will Graham and Hannibal. And at first I was like, oh my God, please do not ship adorable puppy Will Graham with an actual serial killer. I was like, Bench, don't do this. Don't ship him with a literal murderer. And then it just like, the show just like really kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I was just like, yeah, I ship this now. Like, I didn't want to, but they basically made me go there. Like, they're trying really hard to like make you, like, no offense. There's just like scene after scene where they're like, they did the whole like two sides of the same coin type of deal with them. And they're just like flirting by like killing people and like getting into each other's head. And like, I'm like, it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, my boyfriend would hate this because he hates when I like ship ships with like weird, problematic, or like toxic dynamics. Like, it's pretty funny. He gets pissed off that I ship Q and Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation, which comparatively is like a walk in the park compared to Will and Hannibal shipping. It's just a lot darker and a lot more fucked up, and I can like definitely see the appeal, but I'm just like, wow, Adam would hate, the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, wow, Adam would hate this so much. Like, it's pretty funny. I was getting like glee out of like, you know, I didn't want to ship it either, but they made me ship it. So anyways, I'm gonna shut up now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.